Grüezi miteinander. Welcome to the oral presentation of Group 6 in GED 107 Psychosocial Perspective of Education. Good afternoon, classmates, especially to our professor, Dr. Jude Patrick F. Cabadin. I'm Madeline Ethan, your discussant in this presentation. Let's dive into a brain teaser to get things started. Here's one for you. You have maximum of 10 seconds for each word or phrase. 10 seconds starts now. You're right. The first word is misunderstood. Correct. The second word is walk in the park. You're one in a million because you got the third word. You got it. Looking back. Yes. Fifth phrase is you're under arrest. Yes. Sixth is stand by me. Correct. Seventh is walking in thin ice. It may be challenging, but you got it. I see you, understand? The last but not the least, belong. Well done, classmates. What can you say about the short activity? Did it encourage your critical thinking? The general topic is about critical pedagogy, while my specific topic is empowerment theories. Here are the content of my presentation. Under empowerment theories, I choose to focus on needs theory and situated learning theory. This presentation also includes some of my classroom application and research samples. Critical pedagogy is a philosophy of education that enables and encourages critical thinking in learners. With roots in critical theory, it calls on teachers and students to explore their surroundings and the status quo to examine, first, power structures, pattern of inequalities, oppressive acts and systems, social movements, and political acts. Critical pedagogy is largely attributed to Brazilian educator and philosopher Paulo Freire, who championed the idea in his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed, first published in English in 1970. Freire said that by developing critical thinking skills within the education system, learners were more likely to connect their own problems and experiences to the wider social context around them. He called this critical consciousness, the necessary starting point for praxis, or the power and knowledge to take action against oppression. Since then, Freire and other theorists have linked teaching and education to social justice and democracy, and many have championed the idea that critical pedagogy can enable individuals to create change and fight for the freedom of the oppressed and marginalized peoples. It has three stages: unlearning, which require learners to revisit their existing knowledge in the interest of challenging and interrogating it, and quite possibly discarding it. Learning requires taking in new information, new idea, and new context. And relearning, which promote the notion of continuous improvement and development. It reminds learners that there is always more to learn and that they should continue to ask questions and seek further knowledge. It has also been linked with a number of movements including those focused on human rights, civil rights, disability rights, indigenous rights, LGBTQ plus rights, environmental rights, and lastly, post-colonial theory. Before we continue with the focus theories, let us first watch this video about empowerment.
Empowerment is an ongoing process through which those who do not have an equal allocation of resources gain increasing access to resources. Notice several aspects of this definition. It is relational. It involves a disempowered group who lacks access and control over resources, and they're gaining relatively more access and control over those resources. Empowerment also involves multiple ecological levels. At the individual level, empowerment is about thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. At the level of setting or organization, it looks like reciprocal helping and mutual influence. How does an individual or a disadvantaged group gain access to resources? They work together on shared goals, that's how. Empowerment often happens through alliances and shared initiatives. Think of one light bulb. It cannot produce a lot of light, but if it gathers with a lot of its friends, then it can have real power and make a difference. That's empowerment, going from not having enough power to do something to getting more power so that you can do what you have to do to gain access to the resources you need. Empowerment also sometimes means dismantling unjust and oppressive systems, and advocating for the rights of those who are not heard.
Louis Edward Ratz was born in Dunkirk, New York on August 26, 1900s, the third eldest in a family of 8 children. His mother and father has emigrated independently from Germany earlier and were first-generation Americans. In meeting the needs of children, 1972, Ratz described his effort to extend Dollard's frustration-aggression hypothesis, a prominent theory about aggressive behavior published in the late 1930s. Dollard, 1939, argued that aggression is largely the result of frustration and that frustration almost always results in aggression. Ratz saw a connection between unmet emotional needs and 5 types of problematic behaviors: aggression, submission, social withdrawal, regression, and the manifestation of psychosomatic symptoms. In other words, when a child displays a pattern of behavior that is characterized by one or more of these symptoms, then that child may be experiencing an unmet emotional needs. He asserted that emotional needs have their source primarily in the relationship between the infant and mother, although some needs he suggests could have a biological innate basis, and as the infant grows and develops, needs are learned through the parental relationship and the broader culture. These are the need for love and affection, the need for recognition, praise and reward, and the need for economic security, the need for belonging, the need to be free from fear, the need to be relatively free from feelings of guilt, and the need for self-respect. Ratz argued it is a part of the teacher's role to try to meet the emotional needs of children, particularly because unmet needs interfere with the learning process. Finally, teacher found that efforts to meet student needs can show remarkable changes in student behavior over a short period of time, often a matter of a few weeks. Efforts to meet the emotional needs of someone else can be seen as condescending. As individual, we might resent someone else, uninvited, who choose to meet our particular needs. However, teachers play an important role in providing security and safety for students in the classroom. Their efforts are normally widely welcomed by students. Louis Ratz's needs theory is centered in identifying and addressing the needs of students to enhance their learning experiences. The theory can guide educators in creating environments that support students' intrinsic motivation and psychological well-being. Several ways to apply it in the classroom settings are understanding student needs by means of assessment and differentiated instruction, creating supportive environment by means of safe and inclusive atmosphere and emotional support. Third, promoting autonomy and responsibility by means of student-centered learning and teachers' responsibility. Fourth, addressing basic needs by means of physical and psychological needs. Fifth, fostering positive relationship or the teacher-student relationships and peer relationship. 6. Encouraging growth and development by means of growth mindset and feedback and reflection. And 7 and last, integrating real-world relevance by means of problem-based learning. We identify the needs of our learners by means of studying their demographic profile and addressing their diverse needs individually based on their profile. We consider this situation's strength and weaknesses, even their personal and family problems. Some students with internal problems like poverty, broken family, or even different kinds of abuse affect their studies, which turn to low academic performance, absenteeism, and dropping out. This picture shown one of my home visitation to talk and persuade some student in the remote area of Barangay de La Paz, Buena Vista, Quezon, who are at risk of dropping out. Fortunately, after some talk and agreement with these students, parents, and subject teachers, these students went back to study and passed the requirements in different learning areas, which allowed them to pass grade 9 and currently enrolled in grade 10. These are some sample researches relevant to Lewis Rath's needs theory. First is the basic psychological needs in physical education scale in Filipino, an exploratory factor analysis by Kahas and Hasandra, which focus on adapting and evaluating the basic psychological needs in physical education or BPNPE scale for Filipino high school students, which involve translating the scale into Filipino and assessing its reliability and validity. The translated version was tested with 408 students from Metro Manila, and results showed good internal consistency and construct validity with appropriate reliability scores and factor analysis confirming the scale three-factor structure, competence, autonomy, and relatedness. The study concluded that the Filipino BPNPE scale is a reliable tool for assessing psychological needs in physical education but suggests further validation is needed. Next one is engaging, affirming, nurturing, inclusive environment, a ground theory in a Philippine context by Ragindin et al. This explores how inclusive education is applied in the Philippines, where research on environments for children with special needs is limited. Using a grounded theory approach, that study develops a framework to understand effective inclusive settings. Interviews with 32 special education teachers and classroom observation revealed three key dimensions of an inclusive environment: engaging, affirming, and nurturing. The second theory of focus is the situated learning theory by Leib and Wenger. John Leib is a social anthropologist and learning theorist who believes that learning is a social process as opposed to a cognitive one. In this way, John Leib challenges the conventional understanding that learning is best achieved through learning activities, for example, in a school setting. Educational theorist and practitioner Etienne Wenger argues that learning is an intrinsically social process and that one of the primary sites where learning occurs is in community of practice. Situated Learning Theory or SLT, first presented by John Leib and Etienne Wenger in 1991, explains the process and development of learning when individuals have the opportunity to participate in a community of practice. In such a community, new learners reach the level of the expert as they have more opportunities to practice within the context of learning. In this light, learning is unintentional. This unintentional nature of learning is what the authors call legitimate peripheral participation or LPP. In LPP, the learners move from the periphery of the community to the center as he or she gains expertise and engages and practices actively in the socio-cultural practices of the community. SLT model represents the concept, constructs, and proposition. The concepts help to define SLT, which is the learning, the skills, and knowledge gained as a result of participating in a community of practice. Context, the environment, which the situated aspect of learning occurs. Novice, the learner and newcoming in the community of practice who will learn from the expert around, and the expert, which is the set of individuals who know about the subject to be learned. Situated learning focuses on the importance of context, social interaction, and real-world application in the learning process, opposite with the traditional classroom setting, which often involves abstract knowledge taught out of context. Some strategies that show situated learning are real-world context, based on project-based learning and case studies, communities of practice which involve group work and collaborative learning, and peer teaching, role-playing by means of simulation, field experiences by means of field trips and service learning, use of authentic tools and resources by means of hands-on activity and authentic resources. 6. Apprenticeship model by means of mentoring programs and peer apprenticeship, problem-based learning by means of problem-solving tasks and inquiry-based learning, and 8 and last is by means of reflection and discussion. The pictures support the application of SLP in a culminating activity of Project the Learn, Beyond the Four Walls, which is the acronym for Designing Learning Experiences Against Rote Mode. This is an action research in Lopez's district wherein I'm the coordinator in partnership with our district supervisor that focuses on basic education development pillar on quality, and its objectives are: first, to improve the participation rate of 193 grade 10 learners in modular distance learning to address at risk of failing status. Second, increase performance rate of 193 grade 10 learners in modular distance learning to project-based learning and portfolio assessment. Third and last is to innovate junior high school curriculum delivery through transdisciplinary curriculum integration and integrative assessment. This slide shows sample researches relevant to Leib and Wenger's situated learning theory. First is a research in the eyes of the students, bottom-up pedagogical teaching using lesson study by Insorio et al., which explored the effectiveness of lesson study in improving how senior high school teachers teach research concepts in the three I's: inquiries, investigation, and immersion subjects. Teachers had previously struggled with students' grasp of research principles and processes. Over 2 months, 3 research teachers implemented lesson study principles in 12 lessons. The study involved grade 12 students selected based on their diagnostic test results and prior examinations. Data were gathered through semi-structured interviews and classroom observations, open-ended questionnaires, and teachers' journals. The findings indicated that lesson study positively impacted teaching effectiveness, through some areas for improvement were also identified. Second is the museum trip to enrich environmental awareness and education by Punzalan and Escalante, that examined how exposure activities through Natural History Museum can enhance STEM students interested in environmental issues through situated learning. It explored how museum visits affect students' understanding of these issues, make them seem more urgent, and provide opportunities to interact with museum staff. With the use of observation, questionnaires, and focus groups with 20 STEM students from a private Philippine school in 2019, the research found that museums positively contribute to the students' interest in learning about environmental issues. Reference used are the following: Welcome to the Empowered Classroom. The Empowered Classroom is a shift from giving choices to inspiring possibilities. It's what happens when you move from making the subject interesting to tapping into students' interests. When you go from saying you must learn this to asking what do you want to learn. It's a shift from taking assessments to assessing your own learning. It's an iterative process full of mistakes and ultimately lead to success. It's a shift from the teacher asking all the questions to the students asking their own questions, where they will chase the inquiry process and take learning off-road. It's a shift from uncritical consuming to critical consuming and creating. Here, students move from critical consuming to inspiration to creativity, where they use the design process to launch their work to the world. It's a shift from differentiating instruction to personalizing learning, and it's a shift from rigid to adjustable systems so that students own the process. They can set their own pace, choose their own formats, and decide what resources they want to use to accomplish their goals. It's a shift in mindset from compliance to self-direction. In other words, it's a shift towards student ownership. When that happens, our students become the creative, critical thinkers who change the world.